My name's Dyer, and I head up consultancy for Yotta. I'm going to be talking today about getting best value from your data. Yotta, if I just talk you through a bit about who Yotta are. For those of you who are not aware, Yotta are an asset management and visualization technology business working predominantly in the highways and transportation space in the UK, and it'll be sort of a SME type business, just over 100 employees, and based in the UK, but working internationally in Australia, South America, and in Europe as well. And we work with over 200 local authority and private sector customers in the UK, and very much working in this sort of the environmental space, so that's waste or parks or sort of areas, or it's in the highways and transportation. There's street lighting and street works experience as well with our software and services as well. So yes, we work with over 200 customers with our software that we have. We provide software in terms of asset management software, both operational day-to-day management of services for local authorities, and strategic tools as well to help make good decisions with the data that they have back. So this is an example of the sorts of customers that we're working with currently at the moment. So, as I say, talking today about getting the best value from your data. So the way I'm going to kind of go with this is we're going to look at, this works, decision making, understanding decisions from data, the importance of data and its value, looking at how data, can we trust it, can we trust what it can do for us. So often people working with data, you find that rather than using the data to make those decisions, you end up doing what you've always done, or look at local knowledge and actually I'll just do this because it's easier. But it's actually, why is that? So we need to understand why do we trust it, or why don't we trust it, and what do we do with that? How should we manage it? How do we manage our data? Why is it so important? So, we need to make sure that we're looking after it and managing it appropriately. And then the future of data and where it's going, and how we can begin to make use of the new data and the use of data groups and types that are available to us. So what I want to sort of start us off with is making decisions. How do we make decisions? And I'm looking at almost from 2 points of view. When in day-to-day life, if you like, you make decisions on all sorts of different things. Just even getting here today, how did you arrive at the venue? Did you get driving a car? Did you get the train? How did you plan for that? What data, what information did you use to make those decisions to arrive here today? Even just choosing lunch. All the basic things that you do all ultimately arrive from having assessed or thought about information to make those decisions going forwards. And I think quite often we sort of neglect that fact, and we just need to understand that whether we're working or whether we're at home, there's always things that we use to make decisions about what we're going to do. So how do we make those decisions? There's almost two approaches to it as well. We can make sort of more heart reactive type decisions. Perhaps more of an emotional response to something. I'm going to do this, and I feel it's the right thing to do. Generally, can be a bit more chaotic. Can be a bit more sort of navigating through. Perhaps lacks more measurability about the impact of decisions, and just having to navigate your way through things rather than having it planned out and worked out the way to go. It's a way of making decisions. Or it can be a more logical approach. It can be evidence-based. It can be premeditated, thought out what you're going to do. And that can become more reportable, more measurable. You can understand the performance of the outcome. You can repeat it and understand that each time you do something, what the impact is going to be, and then you can continuously improve the way you work. Now, you can look at two different ways of doing it. Both happen all the time, but I would argue the one that is perhaps more planned and logical can have more of a benefit to both yourself and the organisation that you're working for. So what we want to be able to do is defend those decisions. So if we're making decisions, we want to be able to defend why we've done something. And something that is, again, more planned and thought out tends to be something that is you can explain more clearly what it is that you're doing. It can be more transparent and open for people to understand. So how do we do that? Within our service, you have plans and strategies. You have an approach within the guidance that sets out how you're going to go about it, and you should be familiar within the sector these type of documents, whether it's the ISO standard that sets out a framework and an approach to the way you work, or the Institute of Asset Management that sets out an approach or a methodology for the way you work. And then we've got the more recent guidance documents around asset management in highways and the new code of practice that sets out a structure and an approach that you might want to take. And that's sort of your strategic asset management approach to the way you work. And from that, we can become more measurable and manage things in such a way that provides benefit and repeatable work in the way we operate and work. So what we do is you have the data and that you're collecting, and data, you need to understand what it is you're trying to collect to understand what you're trying to do. So collecting data with a purpose, and then you need to have a way of analysing and collating that data. So being able to take that data, process that data in such a way that it gives you outputs that you can then use to make good decisions. Again, that can be repeatable and manageable, and ability to be able to say, well, these are the reasons why I've made those kind of decisions. And that information from the system then can be turned into information that becomes usable at different levels. You have different stakeholders who demand different requirements. So if you're working with an engineer or someone on the ground, they may want to look at the analysis of the detail of the information, whereas if you're dealing with a senior decision maker or senior stakeholder, they'll want to see it in a more reportable, high-level approach. It's understanding what information that you want from the information to present your case and make decisions. And it's the way that we can defend, and what we do is the approach that we need to be using. So what is data? I thought the definition of data it's set out in, it's basically an asset. It's something that is our most valuable thing that we have. We spend our money and time on our most valuable asset as we see it, which is the carriageway asset on our highway network. But actually, understanding the information that we have and the data that we're collecting and understanding about it is the most valuable thing to enable you to make the right decisions, rather than just needing to spend money. And the pressure to need to spend money to get the job done can often override the need to understand why I'm getting that job done or why I'm doing this, and being able to defend the decision that you're making. So an asset is defined as an item, thing or entity that has potential or actual value to an organisation, and realisation of value will normally involve balancing costs, risks, opportunities, performance and benefits, as defined in the Institute of Asset Management Anatomy document. So it has the value and the potential value it has for the organisation is all sitting in the information that you have available, and enables you to demonstrate why you're doing certain things. And data is the thing that actually drives those decisions going forwards, which is absolutely critically important. So with that in mind, thinking about, for those of you who are involved in a local authority, I'm not sure who is working with local authorities, or whether you're working on the strategic network or private sector work, or maybe familiar with the incentive fund, the need to be able to demonstrate that you're using asset management principles to deliver your highway service. And over the last few years, authorities have been submitting where they are in their bandings against that standard, and with about 99%, I think, is the reported figure that are now sitting at the top band within the incentive fund, within the local authority, to demonstrate that they're doing things in accordance with good asset management practice. But there's the changes coming in for this year's submission for the incentive fund, and those changes are very much sitting around the data and information. At the moment, data sits within the incentive fund submission, but isn't a core part of the submission. The expectation is that that's going to change, and it will become a core part to demonstrate that you're managing data and information effectively. Steve Berry from the Department for Transport talked about this at the Elk Ridge conference this year, and was highlighting that actually it's data it's going to be a core part of the submission for this year, and authorities need to demonstrate how they're working with that. And a particular emphasis is being placed on, data is one of your key assets and is important to everything you do as highway authorities. So again, it's just being raised, sort of the bar, if you like, it's being raised with authorities and customers to be able to use and manage data appropriately. Just other things that I was probably questions I want to raise, really, just about how do you manage your data within the organisations that you work for? How many people here are working for a local authority? 1, 2, okay. So do you have a funded data management strategy? Do you understand the data that you have, why you have it, and like a 3 to 5 year plan in the same way that you would manage your highway infrastructure, to understand the data that you have, why you've got it, how you're managing it, to make decisions? Is that communicated to people? Have you even seen it? If you're part of your business, do you know that sort of thing exists? And what role do you play as a stakeholder within that strategy? Whether you're client, contractor, supplier, everyone has a part to play in understanding the data that's being collected and managed and held. Traditionally, you may think it sits within an asset management team to collect data and manage data, or whether that's understanding inventory condition through scanner surveys and scrim surveys and all this kind of thing. But everyone is managing data at all different levels in the organisation, and all of that data has value and is actually used to make decisions whether you realise it or not. And the quality of that data is imperative to understand what performance and outcome you're trying to get to and what you're trying to achieve, which is why it's important that it's valued and looked after appropriately so that decisions can be made properly with it. So if you're a contractor, you may think, I'm kind of free from that, but actually everything that you're doing on the ground in terms of building new infrastructure should be containing information that should be fed back through to the customer and the client to be used for future decision making and capturing as built information, or health and safety information, or how that is now going to be used. It's critical to the service of the customer. And in my experience, my background is I've worked in a local authority for 11 years as an asset manager in a local authority, responsible for making decisions about where money's spent on the infrastructure, managing the highway service budgets, ensuring that capital and revenue balance works effectively, and I understand how that kind of works. But so often you're sitting there blind when it comes to the work that's being done on the ground, because the information is not coming back in a format that can be used for decisions that are made later on. So you're not sure what's actually getting delivered. It's absolutely critical that that's understood and reflected back into that. So everyone working together and understanding the value of that information. So just an example of a bit of a case study that we've been working with. We worked in Northamptonshire. Is anyone from Northamptonshire here before I start digging a hole that I can't get out of? Good, right. Which shows I can say anything I like now, which is great. So the classic piece here is that laying out your pavement asset, when you're actually resurfacing roads, that the technology that's now sitting out there on the plant and equipment that's out there can capture all types of information, whether that's roller passes, whether it's temperatures of the laying of the materials, compaction rates. Is all available at the point of laying. The start and end positions are all captured on the vehicles that are actually being laid on the ground. That information is readily available to be handed back to the customer in a digital format and can be loaded into your asset management system. In this case, our system Horizons, which enables you to better make decisions, sort of asset management decisions. We can capture that information, display it, and use it as built information. You can hold records for future if there's a problem going forwards. Actually, there's a failure on the road, or what was actually laid, when was it laid, how was it done. It's all there. All the information is visible for you, and it's just information to say this road was resurfaced from here to here at this time with this material, and can be fed back into your forward planning going from there. This information, pretty much, I would argue that most people that are working with contractors in this way should have this information available to them, and you can ask your contractor for it. And should be perhaps supplying it, really. But it's a really good example of where data at the moment is just being lost and it's not being looked after in the way it should be. Is anyone familiar with this type of information that's available? Do you make use of it? Yeah? but it's actually capturing it rather than having. When I used to sit there at my desk as an asset manager and I'd receive them all on drawings, on bits of paper, and they'd be sort of stacking up everywhere, and you put it in the cupboard, you never look at it again. But actually having it in a format which you can recall at any time and using models is absolutely critical. I would suggest that we're neglecting the importance of data. I think it's getting better. Don't get me wrong. I think it's getting better, but I think there's a reason for neglecting or not understanding the breadth and depth of data that's available to you. And I would argue that's because it's siloed into different departments. So whether that's in the highway maintenance department, the street lighting, it's in the waste management department, or if it's in the grounds or bridges, structures, and drainage information, it's all sitting across your organisation, and everyone's got information either duplicated or not being looked after, and yet that information is all valuable for you when you're making decisions that you don't perhaps realise you've got. And is it being looked after and treated in the way it needs to be to enable you to work with it? I think there's a bit of a challenge. There's a bit of a challenge that we've got, a bit of an uphill challenge. It feels like a bit of a mountain to actually work out how do we break down those silos and work out how we work together and share that information to enable you to get better outcomes for your service and get better value for money for the data that you already have or is out there available for you that you're not actually receiving. So where does it come from? Where does the data, where do we get our data? Now I've described it as a bit of an iceberg in that what we're seeing is, if I can actually make this work, is we tend to work with traditional sources, which is really almost like the tip of the iceberg. It's that sense of data that we have, that we're used to working with, we collect on a routine basis, but actually, do we understand it enough? Do we just do it routinely? We just go and collect the same thing year on year without really thinking about what we're doing with that data. Do we need it? Everything that you collect will then need to be managed rather than it needs to have a purpose as to why you're doing something, rather than just, we do that every year. We collect that data and there it is, and that's what we do. What else is available to us? So the traditional sources could be annual surveys. We're out there doing scrim, scanner, visual surveys and just collecting that data. Accident data that can be there to tell you about incidents or problems on the network. The claims information that you can bring into the mix as well. And defect information that you've got from your routine inspections. All this data is available to you at the moment, and perhaps would be the sorts of things that would be routine for you. But there's a whole wealth of other information that's out there that we can begin to look at. And we can sort of collect that through the big data or the Internet of Things, or through other data sources that are perhaps non-traditional, but you can begin to influence and access, and that can be things like things that are big data are large, complex data sets that we can tap into. We're becoming sensors and things are beginning to become more available to us. You may begin to use that. I know, for example, there are drainage sensors that are going into gullies and drainage infrastructure at the moment, which can then feed you dynamically information, or whether it's other data sets that are basically feeding you information with the large volume that's out there. What you want to be able to do is tap into that and make use of it for your decisions going forwards. And then you want to be able to bring those sensors together through the internet. So, a classic example of those is you can, with your street lighting infrastructure. You can manage your street lighting infrastructure dynamically through systems and information. You can have a live transition of fault reporting through there. If you then begin to sort of translate that into other infrastructure and how you would want to manage any changes in infrastructure and condition and performance, there are sensors out there that can be applied to many parts of your many pieces of infrastructure to help that work. And you need the ability to be able to pull that in and make better use of it within that, in conjunction with your more traditional sources of data that you would be used to collecting. But what you want is a data management strategy that sets out how you're going to manage that and deal with that, and what you're going to collect, how you're going to look after it, how you're going to refresh it and keep it up to date and current, who the data owners are within that, and how you're going to work together to get the best result for the performance you're looking for. So there's a whole range of infrastructure that's out there that you can be working with, whether it's drainage infrastructure or your road network or footway network. It's lighting, structures, green spaces, all this information. There's lots of wealth of information. We need to understand what we need for what level of performance you're looking for. So how should we be managing that data? We should be looking to bring those silos and bring them together so that you can work across the organisation to get the benefits across organisation, rather than just in isolation looking at what you're trying to achieve. What is for the bigger organisation objectives, and how can you share the information that you have to enable the wider organisation to get what's needed? And that could be both for your benefit and the benefit of others in the organisation as well. Within asset management, there's an approach, isn't there, to understand what the organisation objectives are, what the policy around how we're going to deliver the service within highways, a strategy to set out how you're going to do it, a framework to deliver it, and then a performance reporting back up again about how your service is performing. And the data that you're using to help service that is critical to ensuring that the right messages are going out, it's accurate, and people can trust and rely on what you're doing. So what we want to be doing is saying, okay, well, let's look at all of the infrastructure as a whole, looking at how they can serve each other. They don't work in isolation. The carriageway, the footway, drainage, we know that drainage has a big impact on the performance of your carriageway. And so it's thinking about, well, what performance do we want from that, and how do they relate and impact on each other, and treat them as a whole rather than independently. And then you're beginning to look at, well, what performance do I want and what cost is there to enable that performance to be achieved? So how much money do I need to spend to deliver the required performance across that different pieces of infrastructure? And who are the key stakeholders that I need to engage to ensure that performance is met and understood and the funding is appropriately provided? Or if the lack of funding is there, what the impact on performance would actually be? I think there's often a misconception that in some ways we're in austerity in times where we haven't got any money to work. It can be like, oh, well, we're never going to be able to deliver the performance that's required, so therefore why do we bother? But actually what we want to be saying is, well, good asset management practice enables you to understand the performance that can be achieved for the money that you've got available. And then funding should be distributed accordingly to enable that performance to be achieved, or the impact of lowering the performance to achieve and what that's going to do. And thinking and treating everything as a whole is critical to understand that, and the data is critical to making that happen and work, and being able to evidence why you're doing something or why you can't do something, or what else you'll need to make that happen. If increased performance is required, at least you can have a real clear and speak with confidence on what can be, what you need to enable that to happen. So what we want to be able to do is interact with sensors in the field, to be able to connect with different types of sensors, to be able to feed through in a live interactive way what the condition of the road is, or the condition of the infrastructure's behaving is. And looking at, you've got air quality, for example, is a big issue at the moment, and being able to improve air quality. So there are air quality sensors that you can put out in the field, and that information can be fed through, which will enable, again, you to understand, well, where would I spend the money to improve air quality? Thinking about the infrastructure as a whole rather than independently, but being able to feed information in to make those decisions is what you need. Then, once you've got the sensors in the field, it's then being able to say, well, let's look at all the sensors that we have, and we need to be able to feed that back into our tools to enable us to understand what's going on. And you'll have multiple sensors across multiple infrastructure. So how are you going to handle that kind of data going forwards? What you need is the information coming through an API into your system to better collect that information to enable you to understand performance. But with all this, there's these new ways of through sensors and new data that's becoming available. You need a means and a mechanism to be able to tap into it and make it work. Within best practice documents, it talks about how you can trust your data and how you, what it is that you need to understand about your data to enable it to trust. As I was saying earlier, so often people don't want to wait for the information. They just want to act and get something done and get some money spent because you've got constraints of the financial year or you've got other constraints going on. But what we want to be able to do is ensure that whatever we do is measurable, so that we can defend what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so the sorts of things, that's interesting, sorts of things, that's really ironic, isn't it? That's brilliant. What? That's just to prove a point. So how can we trust it? So the accuracy of the data, what is absolutely critical to understand to give confidence. So when you're being able to talk to different stakeholders in the organisation, whether it's the engineers, which can often be the challenge between we're setting a model out or a plan out to do something, and the plan says if you deliver in these areas, this is the performance that you're going to get, and then you're told, oh no, I'm going to do something completely different because I think that's a better way of working. You think, well, I understand why you might think that, but we need to better work to a plan and improve that plan in a measurable way. So it's trusting the accuracy of the information that you have to enable those decisions to work. Is it valid? When was it last collected? Is it telling you the right information? Who's managing this? Who's managing the quality of what you're producing? And that's again why you need a data management strategy to set that out, and data owners to own that data to ensure that it's both it's valid, it's correct, and can verify that no, that's come from a source that we can trust going forwards, and getting the buy-in from the full business as to what you're trying to achieve. Is it reliable? Can we rely on the information? Yes, it come from a source that we can trust. Is it, I've talked about sort of perhaps new data sets that are available out there. Very easy to say, oh no, scanner. I want scanner data to tell me what performance the road is. I'm not interested in this other type of data that's telling me something different. But actually, it's understanding the source and where it's come from and the reliability, and then perhaps how much weight that you give to it. We worked with LiDAR data with some of our customers, and looking at it, it's very easy to say, oh, doesn't give me enough information, because it is quite coarse information, LiDAR, but it's giving you a view of the infrastructure that you're working with. Well, apply an appropriate weighting to that data in line with the scanner data that perhaps you're working with, rather than it's valuable information that that's there, but use it accordingly and appropriately. So it needs to be reliable, and you need to better trust it. Is it timely? When was it last collected? What's its life cycle? Think of data as you would do other infrastructure. It has a life cycle. How long is it valid for? I collected it a year ago. Is it still valid today? Or do I need to recollect that information? Do I need a plan that says over the next 3, 5, 10 years, that data needs to be renewed and updated in a way? Some of it needs to be updated on a monthly basis. Well, then put a plan in to manage it in such a way. Some of it may last 5 years, and that's fine. But the plan needs to set out how you're going to do it. And again, it gives that confidence to people using it that it's being managed, and therefore you can trust and rely on it. Is it relevant to what you're doing? Why am I collecting that? Do I need to be collecting it? Is that the right way of thinking and working? Do I stop collecting that and start collecting something different? It all costs money as well in terms of managing that data, not only in terms of its going out and collecting it, but storing it, keeping it up to date, reviewing it. You need to ensure that what you've got is relevant for what you're doing, and ensuring it's kept in place. Again, gives you confidence. Is it complete? I know there are different ways of collecting data because of cost on an annual basis to go out and collect lots of different data sets. But it needs to be complete for what you're trying to achieve within the service that you're delivering. And if it's not complete, what's the impact of that? As understanding that going forwards. So how do we use it? Well, as I was saying about asset management, strategic asset management, being able to take that information, take the data, and turn it into information and intelligence that people trust and have confidence in to make decisions going forwards. Running it through, if you've got an asset management strategy, and you've got a policy that's aligned to your corporate organisation's objectives, you have a framework that sets out how you're going to deliver your service, you have a data management strategy to say, in order to achieve those objectives, this is the data and information that I need, and then being able to sort of manage that process up and down through that plan, and then get all the stakeholders engaged, whether that's engineers on the ground understanding what it is and why I'm doing it, so they're bought into the process rather than sometimes fighting it, which can happen, and I understand why, but it's engagement with people, decision makers involved and clearly engaged with what you're trying to achieve and why. It's critical to enabling the success of the service. Everyone bought into the same approach. So, for example, the code of practice coming in sets out a framework for how to operate and work using a risk-based approach. You can have risk-based approach to your data collection and the data management. What risks am I managing, and what data do I need to support the management of those risks going forwards, and ensuring that you're getting the optimum within the way you operate and work. Understanding the drive for efficiency. What you're wanting is to be able to deliver a slick and efficient service, and doing it in a repeatable way, and a way that it saves the organisation money but achieves the objectives that you're trying to set out to achieve. And it has measurable outcomes. That's, for me, the key thing. We can go out and we can spend money on the network anywhere, and you probably get a level of improvement. And you can improve, you can resurface things, you can go out and spend money on structures, you can change your lighting to LED lighting and save yourself some money. But unless you do it against a plan, how do you know how effective you've been, and how do you know what performance that you're trying to achieve? Have you hit your performance target? If you haven't set a plan, executed the plan, learnt from the plan, reviewed it and improved it for the next time, you'll never know how it works. So it's often when you start with these things, there's an element of risk about how you do it, but follow the plan, deliver it. Okay, that didn't work very well. We'll change the plan now that you've learnt from it, and then you'll continuously improve. So it may take a couple of years to sort of bed in, but over the long term, you'll get a much more confident outcome and a much more buy-in and commitment from the organisation that you're working with, both colleagues and senior decision makers, because they'll believe what you're telling them, because performance is transparent and clear in the way you work. So the future of data. Over the last however many years I've put there, last 10 years or so, there's been a phenomenal amount of data that's out there, and we've been used to things like personal computers, smartphone, tablets, but with the sensors that are coming in now, there's the amount of volumes of data that's out there and available that people use, like I was saying at the beginning, on a day-to-day basis. For everything that you make, you tap into your sat-nav and all the data that's telling you about the traffic that's out there, what's going on. All of that is live information and data being picked up from crowd sort of sourcing type information and sensor information that's out there telling you what's going on the network. It's a phenomenal amount. That's just going to escalate again and again and again into billions of bits of data that's out there that people are tapping into, whether you like it or not. So you need to understand what you need and then work with it as we go forwards. So looking at what you need is essentially, as well as a system and a way of actually handling the volumes of data that are coming through. And from within our business in Yotta, we've got products like Alloy, which is a connected asset management solution. The ability to be able to connect dynamically with your infrastructure and tap into the data that's now becoming readily available through the Internet of Things, and being able to tap into those big data sources and handle the volumes of data that's coming in there at a rate that is coming in at. You need to, as the years go on, you'll need to be able to access that information. People will expect you to be able to use that type of information. And so you want to understand what infrastructure you're wanting to collect it from, what's available now, what's available into the future, what do you want to put on the infrastructure that you're managing to tap and bring that data in. But you need a way of being able to manage that effectively. Understanding what your organisation needs, and you can argue this is a little bit old school part of this in terms of its office and field. We're all doing that nowadays, but being able to make that as live as possible for everybody to use, whether it's people in the back office or out in the field, and make that data easily and readily available to them to make the decisions on the fly or back in the office, and make it clear and available for everybody, and giving the view for the right stakeholder of that information. So easy to put information into a system, can so often be difficult to get the information back out of the system. And yeah, you need a solution that works for you. So connecting your organisations and what they're trying to achieve. And then looking at outcomes. What outcomes are you wanting to achieve from that? Whether that's operational outcomes or strategic outcomes. So understanding that the maintenance priorities that you're looking for, understanding the regime of inspection that you're trying to achieve, through to what high-level reporting, what KPIs are you looking to achieve. Within our product Alloy, you're able to bring all of those things together in a dynamic single place. Being able to have a live feed of information coming through and updating this on the fly. So you know that what the reporting you're getting is directly from the information that you're collecting and have it available. So how do you get best value from data? Be clear on the decisions that you need to make. Understand what you need to achieve, what you're going for, understand the organisation objectives, having a clear plan in place. Treat data as your most valuable asset. Understanding what you have, the quality of what you have, ensuring it's as good a quality as you can be, and treat it and manage it. It has a life cycle plan. It has an approach just like your road network does and hard infrastructure has. Data needs to be treated in the same way. Understand your responsibilities. What's your responsibility within your organisation that you work for in managing that data appropriately within the realms of what you've got, and understanding other stakeholder responsibilities and how you can support that and work together to ensuring that the data is treated and handled appropriately from one part of the organisation to another, and it's made available to those who need it most. Break down the silos and share your data. So think about the data that you have available now. Understand what you're using it for now. Could someone else be using that data, or who else has data that I could actually use and have make use of? But understanding it and sharing it and working with it is critically important. Looking at the new data sources that you've got available to you, and engaging with it and seeing, okay, what other data sources could I be using in place of or alongside the traditional sources that you have, and understanding again that data management strategy. And it's very clear it's a funded data management strategy because it can often cost money to collect data. It's not cheap, but understanding what sources you've got available, and probably on that as well, just remembering that you're often making decisions with millions of pounds of public money. To make a decision on the fly and to think, oh no, I don't want to do that, I want to do that because it's easier, or it makes sense for me to do that. Well, you need to understand and rely on the data and trust it to give you the right outcome. And actually spending money on understanding your infrastructure is a key part of delivering a multi-million-pound capital programme of work. And actually, I think it's your responsibility to ensure that happens appropriately. And so it's money well spent collecting the right data for the right outcome. And often it's like, I can't afford to collect that. I haven't got any revenue money to collect it. Well, actually, if you've got capital money that you're spending on a capital project that people's salaries are paid for out of the capital budget, why wouldn't you be collecting the data from the capital money as part of that capital project? It's thinking about it more rather than just, I can't afford it. You can't afford not to, in my opinion, have the right information to make the right decisions. Learn to trust the data, and trust comes with being able to review what you have, buy people into the process of what you're looking at, and help them understand what it is that you're doing. So when it actually comes to making decisions, people feel, oh, I know why that's been made because I've understood that data because they've been part of the process, having that full engagement. And then finally, just understanding the process, data into effective information, making it available in the right formats to the right audience is critical. And understanding your audience at the right time is critical to making the most of it. And you need the right tools to enable that to happen, to get you to the right decision. So yeah, that's me done. So yeah, understanding how to get best value from data. Yeah, that's me done. Thank you. Happy to take any questions if you've got any, but don't feel free to make them up.
How do you support or manage virtual construction or digital construction?
Digital construction.
Yeah.
Can you define what you mean by that a bit more?
Like you have a digger in the field.
Yes.
And that's completely running on your design directly without manually operated and giving level by surveyors on the spots. It's just take your design and dig it out.
Yeah.
This kind of things. Do you manage this kind of things? Do you, on the real time, can you monitor the machine and feed it back to the head office to control those kind of, to monitor, say like machine fatigue or operator fatigue? So that will probably help us to make decision on health and safety, or when you need to change or relieve, these kind of things.
I think it's understanding what you're trying to achieve, isn't it? So if you've got sensors and information that's sitting on your plant and equipment, it's understanding, well, if there's data that's being available from that, what decision do I want to make with that data? So if it's useful, well, then we can take it into the right tool to use it. If it's operational management, you may want to use that elsewhere. But if it's got sensors on it and you want to have a dynamic link, it's possible within our tools to do that. Or you can take a cut of that data at the appropriate time and use it for something in the future. But it's understanding what you're trying to achieve, really. But if there's sensors on it, it can be collected. Any other questions? Janvi.
Hi, Chris. I'm Janvi from Atkins. What I want to ask is, you talked about the risk-based approach and you talked about data-led information and good decisions. Both of them are absolutely vital. I agree with everything. Do you have any examples or best practice in terms of using risk-based approach to data collection, bringing them both together?
I think it's a good question, isn't it? Yeah, no, it's difficult. It is, isn't it? I mean, it's an element of early days, but the way I guess I can put it under personal experience, having worked for a local authority, it's exactly what I did in terms of the way we worked. And one of the key things, particularly as we were moving into a new contract model at the time, we needed to be clear about the inventory that we had. So we decided to do an inventory collection to understand what we've got. We then reviewed that against the information that we currently had, and then determined a prioritised. That's interesting. We're getting blown up again. It's understanding the inventory the information that we had, and we sort of then decided what we wanted to keep and what we didn't at that point, based on what the risks that we were managing at the time. So the contractor, understanding how you wanted to build the contract, they had performance outcomes that was part of the contract. So we were able to then align our infrastructure and condition with those outcomes. So then we could determine the risks that we wanted to take and work with. Thanks very much for coming. Thank you.